Hello, Omer.
Hey.
We are expecting a few others here. In particular, Parth is going to join us, I believe. Yeah, there we go.
I'm here, yes.
So Parth, while we wait for stragglers to wander in, do you want to prep your demo or whatever your prepared materials are for GUAC?
Yes, should I start sharing my screen? Everything else should be ready.
Yeah, before that, we could do the actual intros and welcome for anyone who's joining for the first time. So if this is the first time you're joining this meeting, please feel free to introduce yourself and also add yourself to the attendees list in the agenda. So I don't know who wants to go first.
I can go first. Yeah, hi everyone. So if you hear a bit of background noise, I'm at home today. It's a holiday here, kind of. My name is Omer Gil. I work at cybersecurity. I'm leading the security research team. And we've been focusing in the last 2 years on researching in the areas of CI/CD security, supply chain security. So I'm really happy to see this initiative and enjoy you guys.
Great to have you. Thanks for joining us. Did you vote already?
Yeah, I did. That's the holiday I was talking about.
Any other first-time joiners want to introduce? And if not, us old-timers can also introduce.
I think I've been here once. I'm Justin Abrams. I work at eBay, and I'm leading a supply chain security initiative in 2023. And so trying to get all my ducks in a row.
Hi guys, Sunny Yip here. I'm working with Patel at Kusari. This is my first day actually, and trying to learn more about GUAC itself as well. Thank you.
First day in the meeting or first day at Kusari?
First day at Kusari and the meeting.
Wow, awesome.
Yep.
Diving right in.
Yep.
Hi folks, my name is Roman Zhukov and I'm from Intel. I am eventually responsible for software security and related stuff like supply chain at Intel. So really glad to join to this work group and understand how we can help each other. Thank you. Glad to be with you guys.
All right, maybe we'll go to old timers, and just for the sake of order, I'll call on people rather than having dead silences. David, why don't you go first?
Yeah, sure. I'm David Espejo. I'm an open source community manager at VMware, and also I'm part of the Continuous Delivery Foundation Ambassadors Program. So I'm here to learn and serve as much as I can.
And Parth, I'm going to ask you to introduce last since you'll follow that with your demo. So I will go to, oh, Isaac joined us. Wonderful. Isaac, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Isaac Hepworth. I work at Google. This is my first time in a CDF meeting. I spend a lot of time in OpenSSF and working with SigStore and Salsa and GUAC and others. And chatted with David yesterday, and he suggested I drop in and hang out and meet you all. So so here I am, and thanks for having me. I'm also struggling to get my video working, and so hopefully in the next 30 seconds I'll fix that.
Glad you could join us on short notice. Thank you. And I can relate, getting video working on Zoom is an interesting experience if you happen to work at Google. Oh, there you go. I'll introduce myself. I am David Bendori. I am the engineering manager for Tecton at Google. I am very interested in both CI/CD maturity and in security, two hot topics that are actually a bit related, as I think we'll learn together as we explore more deeply. And with that, I'm going to ask Parth to introduce yourself, and then you can go straight into your demo. I believe we covered everyone else.
I think we missed Ankit.
Oh, I apologize. Ankit.
Yes.
So I am one of the maintainers of Jenkins X, and so we are also trying to get into the supply chain space. We just started, like signing our, our Docker containers and like binaries using cosign. So we will see how it goes.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, so let me start sharing my screen and okay. Can anybody see this? Is that too small, too big? Looks good. Okay. So real quick introduction for myself. I'm Parth, one of the co-founders at Kusari, our supply chain security startup. And some of the projects we've been working on is Fresca, which is the secure builder piece that builds off of Tecton pipeline chains, combining a lot of open source tools and, having a secure product at the end. And the other one is GUAC. So I'm not sure if you heard the Google announcement went out last week. So we're in collaboration with Google, City, and Purdue University. We're kind of all working on this project together. And this is actually a quick subset of the KubeCon slides that were presented last week by my colleague. So I'm just going to run through these quickly, start off, and then kind of go through the demo piece after that, and then open for any kind of questions as you guys have anything. So real quick, right? So what the problem is, right? So we have a bunch of data stored in multiple different locations, right? The attestations, the SBOMs, VEX, all those kind of things are all over the place. So the problems, what we're trying to do with GUAC is consolidate all this information and use this so that we can make, correlate all the data together and make policy decisions, make, more, proactive decisions instead of more being reactive, right? You kind of heard about the OpenSSL, right? It's not, so based on the news that came out this morning, it's not as bad as Heartbleed, right? But it's still something that needs to be fixed, But in order to do that, you need to know where exactly, where your dependencies are installed, where is OpenSSL installed, where in your ecosystem it's there, and then how do you, find it quickly so they can remediate it, right? So that's what GUAC is trying to do, is help answer those kind of questions, figure out what the downstream dependencies are, figure out what the transitive dependencies are, so you can answer those questions downstream. So it fits in, right? So we can see there's different levels, but it fits into the aggregation and synthesis, right? So it's based off of that, right? You can have the trust foundation, software attestations are being generated, right? The SBOM, SOS attestations, VEX, OSV, right? Everything is kind of, the ecosystem is kind of coming together. People are generating all this metadata, but what do we do with all of it, right? So let's aggregate it, and so we can use it in making smarter decisions, and then we can use that to make policy decisions as well as insights in the future. So GRAPH, or GUAC, stands for Graph for Understanding Artifact Composition. I'm pretty sure, David, you wanted to name this working group GUAC also. So I think we stole the name before you had a chance. But that's what the name is. So how does it work, right? So at the high level view, basically, right, what it's doing is collecting from a lot of public sources. So right, so Recore, we're collecting from Google buckets. We're going to add other collectors in the future, but basically for now we have I think Recore collection, Google bucket collection, and finally just like local files that you have, and take all that information, and then eventually, right, you can have it public records and private records. So take all that information as well as from vendors, and take all that and push it into a graph database. In this case, we're using Neo4j. So that we can graph it out, and then we can make all the correlations, make all the different edges, and how they all kind of interdepend on each other. So it's surprising because as we work through some of this stuff, like, if you have some missing data, from one SBOM, another SBOM might come in and kind of fill in the gaps, right? So you can get more, as you add more and more data in, you can get a much more clearer picture on exactly like what all your transitive dependencies are, and you can go further down and down the line basically. So as more attestations are added, as more SBOMs are added, the picture becomes more and more clear. And then finally, right at the end, you can do some queries. At this point, we are using the Cypher queries that are native to Neo4j, but we want to move on to like GraphQL and make it a lot easier. Just for people to start querying and asking questions in general. So what does this look like today? So we have a bunch of information, bunch of nodes that get generated automatically. So what we do is that as we ingest documents, we parse out all the different informations based off of them. So we create artifact nodes, we create attestation nodes, we create like package nodes, and then we create edges between them, based off the relationship, if they depend on this, if they contain a specific artifact, and so forth. And then we haven't incorporated this yet, but we do want to start having identities associated with each of these artifacts. So then you can be, okay, I trust, for example, these are signed. For example, I say Google is producing some of these documents. I trust Google, right? I trust Google in terms of what information they're outputting. Then I can ingest that and I can be, okay, yeah, I trust Google and whatever information they did provide in terms of salsa, attestations, SBOMs, and so forth. I'm going to use that in my graph to make valid decisions. We do also want to add temporal data. So for example, right, if an artifact was vulnerable one day, but the next day it's not, right, we want to have that data incorporated into the graph so we can ask again, like, hey, yes, this version was vulnerable during this time period, and then now it's not. It's no longer vulnerable to that specific CVE or something. So let me kick it off. So what I did before the start of the meeting is I just spun up a local Neo4j. So I'm just running this locally on my computer, and I just ingested a bunch of slides. And if you guys wanted to run through this, there's a setup.md also on the GUAC repo. So you can do the same exact demo I'm kind of showing here, kind of show off, ingest the same information and kind of run your own queries and see what you get. But so what I'm going to show off here is just like quick introduction, exactly like, hey, what it is and what does it look like. So down here, what I did is I just copied and pasted one of the queries that we have in there. So in this case, right, you can see there are 7,000 nodes and edges that are part of this. 7,000 nodes that are part of this ingestion, right? So we ingested a bunch of documents. One main thing we ingested was the Kubernetes. So we ingested all of Kubernetes SBOM and some of the attestations that are associated with it. So a lot of information came out of that. So we got 7,000 nodes coming out of that. So that's a combination of artifact nodes, right? This is going to be your images, your files, so forth. The attestation in this case is going to be the salsa attestations. The builder is what actually did the building. So in this case, depending on what Kubernetes was using, that's the builder that's being used. It could be Tekton. It could be Tekton or GitHub and so forth, GitHub Actions or GitLab. The metadata is the security. It's a scorecard. So that's that piece. So I'll show that later on in the demo. And then finally, packages is the actual SBOM. The packages that come from the SBOMs themselves. So down here, you can see I just ran a quick match and limit my search to 25 because lots of information comes out of this. So we can see here is that we have two different images. So this one is the Alpine latest itself. And then if I scroll up here, this one is Bash latest, right? But they both depend on Alpine, right? Obviously, the Alpine depends on itself. And then the Bash one also depends on Alpine. So you can make all these kind of correlations as you start looking at the actual data. But looking at it in this node form, right, it can be difficult. So you have to kind of query down into the specific things you're kind of looking for. So what our goal is in the near future is basically make this a lot simpler, right? Because we don't want people writing their own queries. It's a lot difficult. There's a lot of information out there. It's really difficult. So what we want to do is have predefined queries that people can start using. At the same time, make API calls, right? That make it easier just to get the information you want and not have to go through the hassle of using Neo4j directly. Any questions so far? Okay. So the next thing I'm going to show is, like I mentioned, we did ingest a bunch of we did ingest a bunch of, the Kubernetes SBOM in here. So you can see this one is 1.24, 1.25 is a kube controller manager, right? You can see right here the versions are changing. So we have a bunch of these, and you can actually go in and look at, okay, what does it actually depend on? Is there an attestation associated with it, and so forth? So if I expand this out, you can see like lots of information comes out of this, right? Because it's like, okay, there is this package, or it depends on the specific file. Oh, there we go. Oh, it keeps changing, but yes. So it depends on the specific file. So you get very, very deep granular information, exactly what's happening. And what we want to do with this is, tie it in with OSV and VEX and all those kind of information. So you can be like, okay, yes, this package is actually vulnerable. So like if you remember the OpenSSL example I just gave, it's like, okay, now I know where OpenSSL version 3.00, the ones that are vulnerable, where is that being used? I can quickly query for that and find, hey, these are all the different things that OpenSSL, all the packages that depend on OpenSSL can be found using this quickly. So I'm gonna, so what I'll do is I'll narrow down specifically. So I'm gonna be looking at version 1.24.6. So what that does is gives us a lot more, much more readable information. So let me zoom in here. So if you recall, I mentioned there was a security scorecard, right? So scorecard information is stored in here. So that this is the actual Git repo that Kubernetes comes from. So you can see here the name. That's the actual repository for Kubernetes. This is the scorecard, scores, the different scores based off the scorecard report. And then you can see down here, this is the actual, so this is one of the binaries, right? So the kube controller manager is the actual binary, which is an artifact. There's also a Go runner artifact up here. And both of these are dependencies of that package, of the Kubernetes 1.246 package, right? Both of these are contained within that package. And then finally, you see that there's an attestation, a false attestation associated with the kube controller manager, but there's not an attestation associated with the Go runner, right? So what GUAC also allows you to do is figure out, okay, what information am I missing, right? So it's like, okay, there's no attestation associated with this particular binary or particular image. So maybe I need to go create that or find more information about that, or or query upstream to find more information about that. So you can see exactly what information you're lacking. At the same time, you can see, okay, what do I trust? Do I have enough information to make valid decisions if I should be running this in a production environment, and so forth. Lastly, I'm just going to show a quick thing for, like Debian is used in a lot of places. So what this is going to show is basically, okay, show me Debian, right? And then if I expand this out, right, lots and lots of things are using Debian. So we can actually make much more, we can actually find out, okay, what are the shared dependencies and what uses Debian, and what packages do they share between each other? So if I run this actually, so what this is going to show is, you can see kubeproxy, this image actually shares 1,155 dependencies that are the same as Debian. So you can see, okay, it's built off of Debian, right? So that you can make that kind of assertions based off of this. So you can make lots of decisions and see where, what relies on what. You might not think something, something minuscule might, you might think a package doesn't rely on something, but it might be the contrary, right? It actually does depend on it, and it could be something that's vulnerable, right? So it gives you a lot of insight and deep insight into the things you're actually looking at. And then let me go back to the slides here. So this is just a subset, right? This was, I think, probably 50 documents, maybe a little bit more, but I think we ingested, Michael Lieberman has ingested at least, I think he ingested about, I want to say like 7,000 or some documents. So we pulled down a bunch of images and use Swift to create the SBOMs and ingest all that information. So I think we ended up getting about like 500,000 nodes and 1 million edges. So we can ingest information really quickly and then start making all these correlations very quickly. So as we ingest more and more data, we can make have a much clearer picture in exactly what we are ingesting. So future work for this, right? We start when ingesting. What I didn't show in the demo is like, I want to say like it's the whole vulnerability piece, right? If you look at the KubeCon demo, some of the docs I didn't have locally, so I couldn't spin that up. But basically, we do want to be able to like, hey, here is log4j. Here's a version of log4j that was vulnerable. Here, and then in the next updated version of that image, log4j is no longer vulnerable. Same for, I think it was text for shell was another vulnerability that got resolved. You could see it being vulnerable in one of the versions and not the other, right? So you can make decisions based off of that. So ingest more vulnerability schemes, get bomb, and then harden some of the existing types, right? So we have some issues in terms of like Swift and some of the other tools are not generating SBOMs per spec. So we want to make some, we're working upstream to start making those changes. So as we're ingesting, we're realizing, well, they're generating SBOMs, but they're not generating SBOMs per spec, or they're missing valuable information that needs to be captured, right? So we're working upstream to have the upstream tools to start generating the valid SBOMs as well as information that make it valuable, right? That if you're generating SBOMs for, just to meet a compliance check, it's not really going to be helpful. You want to make sure that it's collecting the right information and you're outputting the right information that makes tools like this that makes generating XBOMs valuable in the future. And then the other thing basically is make this a public service. I think that's further down the line. Probably next year we want to have some kind of an open public service that people can use to go query for a lot of the open source projects, and then have chips. So GUAC chips is basically plugins, right? So it's like I said, like we don't want people going in and querying Neo4j directly. We want to make this, have utilities that go to GUAC, do some searching around, do some queries and automatically for you and give you the output. So one of the things that we've actually been working on is VS Code extension, basically. So what this does, and if this is too small, I can zoom in. Let's see. Okay, this is not working. Anyways, okay. But what this does is basically, for now, what this does is like, hey, if you have an SBOM, it automatically recognizes that you have an SBOM in your VS Code that's open, and then it can go into GUAC, query for that specific SBOM, and give you a lot more information back. So you can see down here, GUAC SBOM information. So you can actually, for each of the different packages that are associated with that root level package, right, you can get more information, more granular information. And I think eventually we want to make it so like, okay, yes, it gives you more information back saying like, oh, this package is actually vulnerable. You probably want to change this and so forth. That gives you a lot of recommendations back. So as you're working, right, it gives you integration back to exactly what needs to be changed and why. And that's everything I had. Any questions?
Parth, you mentioned using this to make policy decisions. Are you
Yes.
working toward any integrations in that direction as well?
So not yet. So we actually started speaking with Jim Baguadia from Kiverno and Straya. We want to work with them to start integrating this directly into those two kind of into the two different products, so that we can have Kiverno at the same time OPA can start making query decisions and use the information that comes out of GUAC to make, hey, yes, this can run in production or not. So this is very much a pre-alpha project, right? We're still working on a lot of integrations. So like, for example, I think one of the things I want to work on this week is start ingesting OSV, to start ingesting some of that information based on some of the packages that we have, and have that available so that we can see what the different CVEs are associated with the different packages. So I think we're moving in that direction. Like I said, it's pre-alpha, so very much early stage. So we're looking for people to contribute at the same time, just advice, just like technical expertise in terms of what what we are missing, or if there's anything that we overlooked.
And is GUAC ingestion, is that a push model or a pull model? What I'm thinking of is something like, can I set that up to watch my Docker repository, and when OCI bundles get pushed, it automatically ingests?
Yes. Yep. So we have it set up. So the 2 integrations we have so far, and the other one we're working on. So Recore, it's based on, so basically if there are any new artifacts come in, it'll automatically ingest them. Same for buckets and any other integration that we do in the future, right? So it's going to continuously watch over a specific, an open source record or whatever it is, or private one, and then ingest as more information comes in. So you're not sitting there ingesting manually or anything. Okay, thank you.
Well, I will say thanks. That is actually really insightful, and I can imagine using that against a production deployment and having that, to take a recent example, being extremely helpful in identifying where all the places that my SSL vulnerability lives.
Exactly.
We were able to, we have other ways of doing that query, but some of the visualization there is also quite interesting.
Right. Yeah.
I'm biased, but I love GUAC, and yeah, I'm super excited by this. I think there's a huge need for it, and I think, particularly with the executive order and the OMB guidance on SBOMs, we're going to wake up to a 2023 that is absolutely flooded with metadata for software supply chain, including SBOMs. And I think that the comprehensibility and converting that data into meaning is the place where GUAC provides some unique capabilities. And then, to David's point, on top of that meaning, there's the layer at the top of the stack of 4, which is turning that meaning into value. And so we can turn it into value for DevOps, we can turn it into value for risk management, we can turn it into value for compliance, we can turn it into value for policy, we can turn it into value for developer assistance. And so there's a number of different routes that we might take to build value for different audiences on top of GUAC. But the core concept of GUAC, taking this sea of software supply chain metadata, whether it be SBOMs, VEX, OSV, developer, reputation, threat intelligence, whatever it may be, aggregating and synthesizing that and turning that data into meaning is a huge gap in our story today, and I'm stoked to see GUAC stepping up to it.
Yes,
but again,
exactly.
I'm biased.
Do you want to reveal what your bias is there, Isaac, so everyone knows what it is?
Well, so I was a co-author of the Google blog post on GUAC, and work closely with the engineers at Google who are partnering with Parth and the rest of Kusari and City on GUAC. And so my bias really is, my background at Google, or my role at Google, is anchored on software supply chain security. And so I look at Google's first-party software supply chain, and to David's point, kind of trying to figure out, hey, where is Google's first-party or internal software vulnerable to, say, OpenSSL vulnerability is a part of what I look at. But then looking at the open source supply chain overall, and how do we better secure that and better reason about it. I think that part of the problem that we have today is that open source brings tremendous value to consuming organizations, but it also brings significant latent security risk, where latent is part of the key word. Like, we all know that we're taking some risk by introducing open source software into supply chain. No one has any real ability to quantify or reason about that risk. And I think GUAC is the beginning of being able to do that and get a sense of having a reasoning engine for your upstream supply. And so I'm super excited there.
I'll share a bit of. Go ahead. Sorry.
No. Well said. That's very quick points. Exactly what we're trying to make with GUAC. Is exactly what Isaac said.
Hey, Parth, I have a quick question. So you mentioned that, yes, that's the tool can consume or ingest just public records, private vendors, or etc. Is there any suppressing mechanism in place so that I can use that to, I don't know, suppress or to say, okay, this is the most trust source, and the information about that station, for example, or dependencies is the most trusted from this specific source, something like that, or it's only like a database with all the information, and then just wandering on a decision-making chain.
So like I mentioned, there are identities associated, which we haven't incorporated yet. So you can be, okay, these are the ones that are, these artifacts are signed by these identities, and these are the ones that I trust. So these are the ones that I want to use in my queries and such. So you can make, so we're leaving that up to the users themselves, saying like, okay, these are the ones I trust, and these are the ones that I'm going to base my policies based on. So you don't have to, so there, like there'll be a bunch of data out there. You don't have to use it all. You don't have to trust it all, right? It's all based off what your risk appetite is and what you see as being trustful.
Oh, okay, thanks.
So I want to share a piece of my conversation with Isaac yesterday in order to tie this topic back into supply chain maturity, because this could just as easily been a working group meeting for supply chain security as opposed to maturity, and how are they tied together? So the way I talked about this with Isaac yesterday, I pointed out that what Salsa does for builds, I would like, and it provides levels where you can measure your provenance and your ability to reproduce builds and the like. I would like similar measures and levels and standards to apply to your entire continuous delivery. So one input to that would be, well, what is my SALSA level? Another input to that would be, well, am I collecting SBOMs for everything? Am I doing vulnerability scans for everything? Another possible input to that could be, am I loading everything into a system like GUAC where I can query it? And these are all different measures of maturity that in fact go into security questions. As I pointed out to Isaac yesterday, a maturity question is, can I do a push button production rollback? Or is in fact there a manual rollback procedure in production? Well, that actually has that maturity question has security implications in terms of my ability to mitigate a bad rollout that turns out to have a security breach in it. So that's how these topics tie together, at least in my mind. Having hopefully tied everybody sort of back to the goal of this working group, we don't have any other topics today. We do have 25 more minutes scheduled where we can throw new topics on the agenda if there are things people want to bring up, or we could also end early. So I'll let us all sit in an awkward silence for at least a few moments while we figure that out.
I'll just hop in and we don't have to wait. I've been thinking about mechanisms to rate SBOMs using my biases. And the general idea is that not all SBOMs are created equal, and some have tons of data that's really useful, and some have functionally no data. And it would be useful to be able to not necessarily assert correctness, but at least assert what pieces of information are there. Like we might have a dependency on OpenSSL, and the things that would be seemingly very important to have would be like the name of the package, a Perl or similar string, a version, maybe the licenses that it has, etc. And each of those contributes to some ranking that we could put into a scorecard of some sort to get a sense of, is this SBOM actually good?
It's a really interesting idea. I've been thinking about this recently myself, and I'm looking at Google's first-party production of SBOMs to comply with the executive order. And yeah, I mean, I think that, there's often the question about the depth of SBOMs, like how deep do you traverse these transitive dependencies? And I think you're more looking to the breadth of SBOMs, as in the comprehensiveness of the data at a given level or at a given item that's included. Like, how much do I know about this thing, and does it have strong, unambiguous external identifier, which I can then key into other data sets? Because your SBOM ultimately, unless you're using an identifier which can be looked up in NVD or OSV or something, you're going to have a hard time using that SBOM for vulnerability management unless you can provide that mapping into into other key spaces. I've not heard about this. I've not come across this idea of scoring SBOMs for utility or comprehensiveness, but I really like it. There's something there.
Yeah. So my thought is I'm going to try to get a hold of a handful, hopefully a large handful of in the wild SBOMs and go exploring basically and come up with a biased view and then hopefully shop that bias around and see if others agree and come up with some sort of something like the OpenSSF security scorecard or CLO monitor for CNCF. Something like that, but for the SBOMs that so eBay's first party SBOMs, like when we generate them, I would love to know, are we generating garbage or are we generating something useful?
Yeah. And I think that this speaks to a real danger as well that we have with a government mandate around production of SBOMs, that I think that there'll be many organizations that are prioritizing the checkbox rather than the actual utility of the document. And I think that'll be highlighted by, if you have a tool to do that scoring, yes, you met the requirement in that you can check your box to say you have an SBOM, but actually it's useless.
Yeah, I think that's.
Please loop me in. I'm on the Slack, and you can ping me and grab me there, and I can give feedback on where you're at or work with you on it.
Great. So if anyone has a big pile of SBOMs that they're able to share, I would love to get my hands on a few.
So I just posted the link to like Jenkins X. So we have quite a few like SBOMs that you can try out. Let us know if they make sense. Yeah, so like the link is in the chat. I can also post it in the Slack channel. So
yeah, and Justin, we also have, like I mentioned, Michael Lieberman actually he generated actually a bunch of SBOMs from GCR actually. So all the containers or the images that were in there, he created SBOMs using Swift. So we have a whole bucket full of them actually. Awesome. So I think it's a public bucket that I can link you to if you want to start looking at that. So that has as many SBOMs as you need, I think. And what I linked in the chat is basically, the same thing, like, what you're saying is like, how valid is some of the information or how complete is that information? And, you can see the issue we kind of posted about a month ago that Brennan posted here is basically like, we're missing, like, Swift is not doing some of the things properly. Like it's not creating the top level root package using a proper Perl. So that's like, and not including the checksum and all that kind of stuff, right? So it's like, hey, we need some of that information if we want to start making decisions and making correlations, especially in GUAC and for VEX and everything else, OSV and VEX and stuff. So.
I also think it does not use the latest, like SPDX, like spec, right? Like SIFT actually, like generates 2.2 and not, like 2.3 version of the spec. I did, like open one, like issue. So I think it will get done very soon, but that would be nice. So.
Yeah. I think there's definitely work being done. When the new version 2.3 will add support for this for sure.
Justin, we also in the Tecton world, we have SBOMs from our nightly builds, frankly, so you can harvest from us as well. Ping me on Slack and I'll get you in touch with the right people. One of the things on my mind here is you need to collect SBOMs from multiple build systems in order to span the world. Anyone interested in collaborating with Justin on doing some of the analysis he's going to need to do some scorecard brainstorming?
I can, if it's fine. That's okay.
Yeah, I can post. I can get something together and start posting it in the channel.
Yeah, same. I can help you, Justin.
So again, to sort of step back into my big picture, I imagine SBOM scoring as yet another input into figuring out the overall maturity of your CI/CD. There's in fact a very big picture we need to put together that I haven't done any more than think about so far.
Sorry if it was discussed in the last first meeting. Do we have a main objective of eventually creating like a document with the maturity model as we believe should be used by organizations, or the purpose of this meeting is to discuss like topics like we discussed today? I mean, do you have any objective of like a target objective, a big one, to create an artifact eventually?
I think in the big picture, that is our ultimate goal, is that we would have some set of agreed upon standards that we'd seek, as broad industry adoption as we could hope for, in terms of people agreeing on what it means to have a mature CI/CD and how you improve your maturity, what the benefits are from doing so, and so on. I think, as you're hearing here, we're a ways off from there, both because we're just getting started as a working group, and also because the tooling is, being created as we speak. So.
Okay.
That is, like one thing that I may have something for, like next like meeting. So at this point we are using SIFT to create, like SBOM, but that is not being done at, like build times. And so we are planning to move to tools that, like generate it at, say, like build times, like say, for example, like KO. It has like someone looked at, like differences, like, I have seen, like blog post where like people say there is, like differences between using SIFT and using, say, KO or, like APCO. But that would be something that I'm planning to do this week. Maybe next meeting I can show if I see any, like differences, if people are, interested to see that. So.
Yeah, I think that's a great topic for next meeting. Do you want to throw that up in HackMD?
Yes, I did at that.
Great. Any other thoughts around either AIs between today and next meeting, or perhaps demo or discussion topics for next meeting? Last call. All right, we'll see you all on Slack and in our next meeting in a few weeks.
Thank you.
Thanks, y'all.
Thanks, everyone. Nice to meet you, newcomers. Great to have you here.